this. On your Zoom screen, the big black screen with either one face or several faces on it, up in the top right corner, there's a thing that says speaker view or gallery view. And you can see lots of people like Hollywood Squares. On gallery view. Speaker view, you'll only see the person that's talking. On the bottom is a little word bubble that says chat. And if you get into the chat button, you can chat stuff, and you can chat to everyone, or you can chat to individuals. If you chat to just individuals, we'll be recording this, and I'm not sure if we're going to have the transcript or not. If you chat to just individuals and saying, boy, Mike's really going on and this is getting boring, it shows up in the text of the chat. So be careful what you say to your friends in Zoom chat. So that's pretty much all you need. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about Central Oregon Writers Guild and events that we have coming up. I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Dave Edlund. First, Mary Krakow is going to introduce our reader. And then Dave's going to give us a presentation, and he's got some interactive things where he may ask people to chime in. We'll just be muted, which is on the bottom left corner of your screen. You have a little microphone. If you click on it, it'll have, and if you unclick it, you can speak, okay? So I'll probably keep you muted because I can do that as the host. I'll keep you muted through the event. If you have a question, you there's a little reaction button down here also on your screen. If you're loving something that somebody says, you can clap your hands. If you agree, you can do a thumbs up. And then over in the more section of your participant screen, which will list everybody's name, there should be a raise hand button. I don't have that. Can somebody do a raise hand there? So Irene has done raise hand. So you see she's got the little blue. So we can call on her if you have a question during. The easiest thing to do is to put your questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through. And if there's something where somebody needs some clarification before we go on, we'll check in on that. But otherwise, like I said, Dave's going to do some interactive stuff, and then he'll have a Q&A afterwards, okay? Does anyone have any questions right now? No. Okay. Another special thing we have tonight is that our presenter for our September workshop is here, Taylor Cook. And so I will introduce him in a moment here, and have him talk a little bit about what the workshop's going to be. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is writing. I hope that their 7th month of quarantine is going well for everybody, and that we're settling in and figuring this all out. I'm going to do a screen share, and I'm going to show the Central Oregon Writers Guild website here. Okay, and so this is our landing page of the Central Oregon Writers website. It lands on meetings and events. Here's a picture, beautiful picture of Dave, our presenter tonight, and our event. This is a picture of Taylor, who's also joining us tonight, and he's going to be doing a workshop on Saturday, September 19th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. If you're a member, it's $10. If you're a non-member, it's $25. I'll let him tell a little bit about the workshop here in a minute. We also have September 2020 events listed here. So here's today, our monthly meeting. Kelsey Freeman, who's a member here, has just published a book. She's doing a reading. You can just click right on these things and find out where these are. Poet Laureate of Oregon, Anis Mojgani, is doing a poetry workshop. This is through the Deschutes Public Library. I think this is free, but you need to register. So if you're interested in that, I would sign up as soon as possible. These are some classes. Kristen Dorsey, y'all know from Central Oregon Writers Guild, teaching up at COCC, is going to do a memoir writing course. I think it's September 12th through December 19th. Really comprehensive. Kristen's a great teacher. OSU Cascades MFA program is doing their open house. If you've been thinking about a low-res MFA program, you might just check in on that. My beautiful wife, Irene, and her friends, Beth and Bridget, are going to do a conversation at Roundabout Books. Irene's book is coming out this week, her novel. This is our workshop. Again, Irene and I have the Blank Pages writing workshops, and we have the salon on the 19th. You can click there to see about that. Sarah Sear, if you're interested in cultivating a writing practice, Sarah Sear does a great job. And this is, I think, this is 8-week program, I think. And then we have some author readings listed here, okay? October, we're going to, for our Central Oregon Writers Guild meeting, we're going to have the readers, or the winners of our 2020 Central Oregon Writers Contest, and it's going to be a reading. So we'd love to have you there for that, support those people. I'll send out information on that. And then in November, Ginger Dellinger is going to talk about submissions. We've got Chris Boucher from the OSU MFA program here, also an instructor at Boston University and publisher of several books here. He's going to do a writing workshop with us in November. And then December, we'll have a member reading. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Previous recordings of meetings are down here. So August, July, June, May, April, and you can click on those, and most of those are YouTube videos that you can watch. So that's what's going on there. And I think, Taylor, maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about what you're gonna do in September. Do you wanna?
Let's see, get my audio,
Yep.
Let's see. You can hear me? Okay,
we can hear you.
Okay, hi everyone. Taylor. Yeah, so the workshop that I'm thinking up for September 19th, I want to spend a while thinking about the ways that we navigate time in fiction. Because we'll have read, all of us probably, short stories that have taken place over the course of a dinner party, some over the course of a lifetime. We've read novels that take place over the course of a weekend. Some cover generational history, and I want to think a little bit about how they do that. So we're going to think about the way the time moves in fiction, and hopefully we'll come up with some strategies that can help us out of problems in our own work or open up new possibilities in our work. And I'd like to bring in a few very short stories ranging from 2 paragraphs to 2-ish pages that all navigate different amounts of time in very different ways. A few stories that I found really instructive when I'm stuck in my own writing process. And so that's really the gist of it. And we'll do some writing exercises, and we'll leave with some writing prompts that I think pursue some of these strategies in productive ways. Well, that's really the gist. Otherwise, I'll be doing this remotely, of course. I'm actually not in Oregon right now. I'm in New Orleans. And I'm working in Wisconsin, but my job was made remote. And wow, so I'm sorry if any of you are in the waves of the fire. I just had to evacuate from some hurricanes last week, though, so I feel okay.
All right. So, if you got more?
No, I was just going to ask Mike. Is that more or less covered?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, and I'll send reminders out, and you can go right to our Central Oregon Writers Guild page. And click on the RSVP. Taylor's website is there. Taylor is got his MFA at Johns Hopkins. We found him through the Oregon Literary Arts Program. He's been supported by Breadloaf, a writers conference, Paris Review. He's published. He's published in Paris Review, Glimmer Train, Plowshares, Iowa Review, Tin House, all those places that I keep sending stories, and they keep telling me that they're fine without them. So congratulations to you. And yeah, like I said, I'll send more information out as we get closer. So I'm going to pass this off to Mary, and she's going to introduce our reader.
Hello. Okay. I don't see myself on the screen, but I guess I'm there, right?
You're there.
Okay.
You're there.
All right. Before I introduce our reader, so you can take a breath and still relax, I want to let everybody know that our December meeting is going to be, from what I understand, we're going to have members reading. And last December we did a potluck. I'm not sure how it's going to work this year. But last year we had 8 readers, and so I'm looking for people to sign up to do the reading in December. And you can sign up basically at Central Oregon Writers Guild at gmail.com. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. Or you can email me at marykrakow@gmail.com. Either way works. But I know we'll have room for 8 people, and we may have room for more. And it's a really good opportunity to read in front of people that you're familiar with, and it's kind of a good excuse to try out this Zoom business. So, okay, so I'm going to introduce tonight's reader, and I've got my little thing here. So, Morri Stewart has lived in the Pacific Northwest for the past 16 years, arriving here through a circuitous route filled with adventure. She has eaten strange sea creatures on a tiny island in Japan, survived dehydration on a desolate section of the California coast, and has come face to face with a cobra in Africa. Morri considers herself a bit of a Renaissance woman, diversifying her life experience through her work as a river guide, personal trainer, bartender, and freelance writer. She and her husband currently share their home with 2 extraordinary teenagers, a persnickety old cat, and a lifetime collection of books. Faltofar is an entrancing book based on stories the author and her children shared, often while sitting around a campfire, and it's newly released. So I believe she's going to be reading an excerpt from that. And take it away, Morri.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mary. I am honored to have Central Oregon Writers Guild invite me to read my work with my fellow artists. So thank you very much for that. To give you a little bit of a reference before I start in as a starting point, I'd like you to picture a world not so different from our own, populated by individuals, many of whom have nothing in common but their will to live. In this excerpt from my young adult fantasy novel, Faltofar, a human and a dwarf, confronted with their enemy, must make a choice. Set their differences aside and become united, fighting for the one, or embrace the alternative. All right. Just a second here. The air at the center of the pattern had begun to swirl, the tree disappearing behind the smoldering cloud of billowing thick smoke. At its center, a darkness began to form, slowly congealing. At first, nothing more than a mass, it thickened ominously, rounding and stretching into the form of a human floating just above the earth. The grass inside the circle of bones had begun to wither and die, and the soil shifted as if coming to life. And indeed, in a sense it had, as night-crawling earthworms wriggled up from the dead ground. The leaves directly above the shifting mass crinkled and folded into brown death, in contrast to the tree's vibrant green canopy. Tilga drew in a breath as the features in the smoke began to define themselves into that of a woman. It looks like, her words trailed off. The wrath had distinctive features. She felt Serafina tense and knew she saw it too. Tilga readjusted her grip on the knife. The smoky form hovered just off the writhing ground, a malevolent, half-formed replica. To the healer, its dark hair flying wildly. Tilga waited for Serafina to do something, anything, but the woman remained motionless, her face pale, obviously severely shaken. Nonetheless, the healer stood her ground. "I'll be damned if I let a puff of smoke scare me into being a sniveler," Tilga whispered. Lifting her chin, she stood taller, brushing her shoulder against the human for reassurance, and addressed the specter, which shimmered and shifted, its predatory eyes drifting thoughtfully around its surroundings. "Well, what do you want of us?" Tilga tried to sound as if she did this every day, addressing eerie, nasty wraths in conversation. Hearing the quiver in her voice, she mentally pinched herself and determined to try again. "Be gone from here. This is a place of healing and goodness. You have no authority here." Tilga's words reached the morphing smoky mass, but did not have the effect she had hoped for. "I don't think it got the message." She glanced up at the human, but had to look away. The healer had turned a greenish yellow. The apparition faced them fully for the first time. Dark hair writhed around a high forehead, and startling green eyes widened and then narrowed as the spirit saw them. Whoever or whatever she was, she tilted her head slightly to the side as an evil smile spread across her features. Seraphina's chest felt compressed, and she found she could not take a deep breath. She took a step backward, addressing the magic evilness for the first time. "It's not possible. You were banned." Tilga had remained where she was, her knife hand raised and ready. She had not noticed Seraphina drop back. The wrath, not taking her eyes off the two women, bent and with fingers more solid than smoke, picked up one of the bones that created the circle. Twirling the brittle white stick between its fingers, its dark mass of the woman rose back to its full height. "Banned. Well then, I believe you have just done me a favor. One step closer to being unbanned." She spit the last word out like broken teeth. Drifting to the edge of the circle, she addressed Tilga. "You." The creature tilted its head to the other side, using the bone to delicately draw imaginary circles in the air around the dwarf. "It's Tilga, right?" "I should think you'd be hovering in your cave, dwarf woman. Unlike your son, perhaps you do not yet understand where you should place your allegiances." Her words drifted out of the magical circle in a malignant puff of smoke and hovered above Tilga, settling into her hair like some unwanted, dank cloud. Tilga blinked, her eyes suddenly heavy, her focus diminished to nothing. She felt herself falling and clung to the memory of her son. His face was the only thing that kept her from losing consciousness as she toppled to the grass. Like a serpent about to strike, the ghostly apparition pivoted in midair to face Seraphina, ignoring the limp, semi-conscious form of the dwarf. A smile oozed across her face. The rest of her features seemed dead. "Ah, the dark daughter. We meet." Her wispy form shifted forward but stopped at the circle's edge. "Dark child of the present, you have brought me forth into the last of the light, as only you could have done."
Thank you, Morri.
Thank you.
Now I need to know what happens. And on that note, in the chat is where you can get a hold of that book. That's Morri's website there, and it's also on Amazon too, right, Morri? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce our presenter, our featured presenter tonight, Dave Edlund. Dave, we're happy to have Dave with us tonight. He's going to be talking to us about bringing reality into thrillers, how to build suspense into severing ties with the real world. Dave is a USA Today bestseller and the award-winning author of the high-octane Peter Savage novels. Member of the International Thriller Writers, Dave's action political thrillers are often compared to the Dirk Pitt novels by Clive Cussler, the Sigma series novels by James Rollins, and Jack Ryan novels by Tom Clancy, and the historical international thrillers by Steve Berry. Dave is an avid outdoorsman and shooter. He's hunted throughout North America for big game, ranging from wild boar to moose to bear. Dave is a longtime resident of Bend, Oregon, where he lives with his wife and 3 dogs, Dude, Lucy Lou, and Tenshi. And with that, I'll pass it off to you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Let me see if I can get the presentation up here. Oh. Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, good. So I want to talk about thrillers. There are many, many different genres in fiction, of course, and I'm focusing on the thriller genre. And in particular, how do we bring reality into thrillers, which of course are fiction? So how do we blend reality and fiction in a way that builds suspense and is realistic? Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. Let me just share a little bit about myself here. I've been a resident of Bend since '87. I'm a duck. Hope that doesn't bother anyone. My degree is in chemistry, so I come from science, and I learned to write patents and scientific papers, which are incredibly different than fiction writing. But it was a good background for me, and it was with that background that I ventured into writing fiction. I've authored and published 6 full-length novels, 1 novella. As Mike mentioned, I'm a member of ITW, which is it's a fantastic group. And if you're familiar with the thriller genre, you'll know the names of James Rollins, K.G. Howe, Steve Berry, John Land, Brad Taylor, Brad Thor. They're all members of ITW, and they freely share their knowledge. It's an excellent community to be part of and to learn from. My books have received critical praise from many of these authors, also some prominent review publications. I've garnered awards, which I'm very grateful for, from several organizations. My most recent novel, Valiant Savage, will be released here in a little over a month. And following that in the spring will be a new novel based on a new character, hopefully launching a new series with that. That'll be in the spring. One thing that I think you'll notice right away when you look at thrillers is that, like romance novels, you can usually tell a thriller right away from the cover. I would say the same is true most of the time for sci-fi as well. And that cover art is very important when you present your novel. I'm not going to go into that, but it's just something to keep in mind with the samples that I show you tonight. My goal is to make this interactive, and it's a little bit difficult given that we're doing this remotely, but I worked with Mike on a procedure that I think will serve us well here. I'm going to rely on Mike to be the moderator, so he'll stop me if there's a question or a comment to be answered. Otherwise, I'll keep going and field questions at the end. I do have 3 short assignments, and they are short. So if you want to participate in them, and I hope you do, please have pen and paper handy. At the end, of course, will be Q&A. And I would invite any follow-on dialogue or discussion through my email contact, which is shared here. And as a little bit of additional enticement, because the purpose of this is to share. I want to share with you what I've learned, what seems to be wise methodology, but I also want to learn from you. So to encourage that two-way exchange, for the first three folks who respond to me by email in relation to the short assignments or to another aspect related to this presentation, I'll gladly send you in November a copy of my novel Valiant Savage, which is coming out at the end of October. So hopefully that's just a little bonus to encourage interaction here. So what is a thriller? The thriller genre has many subgenres, and I'll list some of those in a moment. But thrillers are noted by the mood that they elicit, this heightened feeling of suspense, excitement, surprise, anticipation, and anxiety. Thrillers are plot-driven. Yes, you will get to know the characters and hopefully bond to the characters, but right out of the chutes, you're going to feel the plot, and the plot is going to pull you along while you get to know those characters. As Dale Brown said, thrillers take you on a ride from start to finish. And I think that's definitely the hallmark of a good thriller. Thrillers are about a push and pull between the protagonist and the antagonist. Mysteries, in contrast, are about a puzzle. Mysteries are similar, but yet they're distinctly different. Suspense is an element. It's about tension. Suspense can be present in any genre. Suspense by itself is not a genre, but suspense is almost certainly found in both mysteries and thrillers. So this presentation is about reality and really how to bridge between reality and fiction, given that we are writing fiction. The other night I was watching a documentary about the film Argo, and then I think the following night one about the movie and the novel Lone Survivor. Now both of those are true stories. If you don't know, Argo is the film about the involvement of the CIA and the Canadian Embassy in Tehran in 1979. The plot is hatched to basically smuggle 6 American diplomats out of Tehran. This was in November, right after the Iranian militants took over the US Embassy, and 52 people from the embassy were taken hostage. 6 diplomats got away. They found their way to the Canadian Embassy, where they holed up for a number of months while the CIA hatched this plot to disguise these diplomats as a film crew on a scouting mission to Iran for a fictional movie to be made called Argo, a sci-fi movie, and they were searching for desert locations. That's all fact. Okay, that all actually happened. If that had not happened, that would be a wonderful plot for a fiction novel. And my point here is that was real, and it was they are so many elements of suspense, so much powerful anxiety and plot elements in that story that it's a great thriller. It's not a novel, it's reality. Another example of reality that is a very good thriller is Lone Survivor. This is a story of Marcus Luttrell, who's a SEAL, a Navy SEAL, and he and 3 other SEALs were ambushed by the Taliban in the mountains of northern Afghanistan. And Luttrell was the lone survivor. The 3 other men were killed. And then Luttrell he's severely wounded, but he manages to find his way to a native village. And the Pashtun custom is, if a villager takes an outsider into their home as a guest, they are bound by a code of honor to protect that guest. So the Taliban is all around. They want this American. They want to use him as a propaganda tool and ultimately kill him. But this one Afghan man Gulab is his name, he argues, no, it is our custom, our honor, our code of honor as men to protect this man who is a guest. And that sets up a lot of tension, a lot of conflict. The village elder, an old man, he walks 40 miles over the mountains to the nearest American base with a message saying, we have an American. So again, a true story. As an author, you would be hard pressed to invent a more exciting story. Now there's the saying that fact is stranger than fiction. And is that true? I would argue no. Fact is stranger than non-imaginative fiction. But my whole point here is that we live in a very strange world. A lot of crazy stuff goes on. And we can look at that for inspiration. And that's really what I want to talk about tonight. How do we look at the real world, the things that we are familiar with, the things that we know about, and how do we bridge those facts, that reality, with our fiction? Oh, wrong one. Okay, so I mentioned that there are many different subgenres of thrillers. If you shop on Amazon, you find that they go 3 levels deep in genre definition for a book. Sometimes we'll even go 4 genres deep. But for thrillers, I think the top categories that you're going to be looking at are political thrillers, action thrillers, military, techno thriller. Techno thriller, I think, really took off after the Tom Clancy novels. And techno thrillers are known by their technology. And so that means you really get into specifics about science or weaponry, things of that nature. Medical thrillers and contemporary thrillers. Contemporary thrillers are kind of a catch-all. And you'll find a lot of popular fiction, New York Times bestseller type fiction will fall into the contemporary thriller category. Okay, so thrillers are fiction, and as such, the novel will deviate from fact. I mean, that's a given. So how does that contrast with fantasy or with sci-fi? And it's a fair question. And I think an even fairer question to ask, or a more relevant question to ask, is how do they overlap? And I'm going to talk about this in a moment. But let's establish what fantasy and sci-fi are. I just looked up these definitions, and what we find is that fantasy is speculative fiction. It's a fictional universe, evolving events, locations, people that are other than this world. Supernatural forces, magic, rather than technology. Harry Potter, of course, is an obvious example, but there are lots of fantasy novels that we would clearly recognize as such. Sci-fi also, I think we can clearly recognize it. It's speculative fiction again, dealing with imaginative concepts, advanced science, faster than light travel, technology like spaceships that are immense, anti-gravity technology, extraterrestrials, time travel. These are all science fiction, and yet they serve as the basis of the genre. And you can have some wonderful novels based on that. Personally, I find it, coming from a science background, I find it extremely difficult to imagine writing a science fiction novel. I enjoy reading them. I enjoy watching sci-fi movies. But for me to break that bond between science reality and go into hardcore sci-fi, it's just, it's very difficult for me to do that. And so thrillers and mysteries are grounded in reality. Although, and this is very important, reality can be stretched, and it needs to be stretched in order to have an exciting fiction. Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about one of my favorite authors, James Rollins. many times over, New York Times bestseller, international bestseller. I hope many of you know of James Rawlins and have read his work. He's a very, very talented writer. Interestingly, he got his education in veterinary medicine, and he ran a clinic in, I think, Davis, California for a number of years, and then branched off into writing, not unlike Michael Crichton. And James Rawlins writes some fantastic novels, some of which are true to the fiction genre. One of my favorite mini series that he's writing, he's only done, I think, 2 or 3 books on it, involves a male protagonist and a retired military service dog named Cain, and from Cain and Abel. And that is just a fantastic series because the bond between man and dog is very strong. As a dog lover myself, I find that very attractive in the novel. That series is very true to the thriller genre. It's very well grounded in reality. Some of Rawlins' other series, some of his more popular series, like the Sigma Force series, is not so well grounded in reality. And his most recent novel, called The Last Odyssey, he wrote, was inspired by Greek mythology, Ulysses and the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so he wanted to write a novel that described how the Odyssey could be, in fact, a novel that had its germination in real events. So this whole novel has to describe mythological events that could happen in a real world. But in doing that, in my opinion, he stretches his definition of a real world pretty far. He has this ancient underground civilization in the Mediterranean, never been discovered before. He has bronze machines that were built by the Egyptians 2,000 years ago, and powered by this green radioactive goo that flows through the machines, even after 1,000 years or 2,000 years. The machines seem to have artificial intelligence. They're capable of hearing sound, of self-movement. That's really stretching reality, but it's a hell of a good story, and it's a New York Times bestseller. Now, is that really sci-fi or fantasy or thriller? Most of the plot is based on current technology, certainly based in current time, current world as we know it, and it's generally considered a thriller, but it really does stretch the limits of the definition. And although I really like these novels a lot, they're not, they don't fit well with what I consider to be a true thriller. So here's a couple of examples, and I can give you more of what I consider to be straight up thrillers. And this is Mark Greaney and KJ Howe. KJ Howe is just a wonderful author. She's female, and she's a best-selling thriller author, which is a little bit unusual. The Freedom Broker, and the other book in the series called Skyjack. The protagonist is Thea Paris, and she works for an international hostage negotiation company or negotiator company. So if a wealthy individual is kidnapped, this hostage negotiator may be called in by the insurance company, for example, to try to negotiate the release of the kidnapped victim, probably involving paying a ransom, but trying to resolve it without the kidnapped victim being murdered and at a lower cost than what the insurance company may pay otherwise. So, very interesting premise. These types of firms do actually exist, so that it is based in reality. All of the locations you would recognize. There are a number of exotic locations throughout Europe that she takes you to. All of the technology, the weaponry, the planes, the boats, that's all very standard. So there is nothing that really requires that you suspend your logical thought when you read these books. And they're very, very well written, very suspenseful, strong characters, extremely strong plot. And same for Mark Greene. He introduced the gray man to the world, I think about 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. And he's since written, I want to say 6, 7, maybe 8 novels in that series. Incredible stories, very well rooted in reality. Again, everything that is called out in these novels, you're going to find, whether it's location, whether it's weaponry, whether it's methods of transportation. He pulls in a lot of international politics. He pulls in governments and international intelligence agencies, and these are all very real. You can Google them. So he brings in all of these elements from everyday life, and he creates these stories that are very believable. And by the way, The Gray Man, his debut novel, is going to be made into a movie by Netflix. And I don't know when it's coming out, but the cast has already been set for it. And I'm looking forward to it. Other authors that you're going to find that are very true to reality are going to be Brad Thor, Brad Taylor. There's a bunch of them out there. So, it's not hard to find true thrillers that lean exclusively on reality, but bring in fictional problems that they tackle. Now, I mentioned James Rollins and the Sigma Force novels. It's kind of stretching, your concept of what's real. Here's some other authors that are going to do that. Jeremy Robinson, great stories, really stretching reality. When you go into these, you want to suspend belief and just go along for the ride. They're great. And the same for David Goldman. Fantastic novels, oftentimes involving time travel, but on the verge of science fiction. I mentioned Brad Thor, Brad Taylor, great authors. And if you're looking for a good read, those are ones to fall back on. Okay. So how do we capture realism? And that's what I want to talk about now. And I'm going to do this hopefully in a way that allows us to have some exercises here, because I want you to practice, I want you to try what I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about location. So physically, where are you? Could it be Bend, Oregon? Could it be Milan, Italy? So where are you? Location. Time. Time is so important, and you can shatter the illusion of reality by ignoring time. Health and medicine. And then things. Things are so important to thrillers, weapons, vehicles, beverages, right? James Bond, I want to have a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Who doesn't know that? Very, very important. Food, personal items, okay? Do you wear a Rolex watch? Do you have a gold chain around your neck? Are you known because you're always going to be wearing U of O neon green duck sneakers, okay? These things tell you something about the character. And they're important. They give you something to hold on to as you're going along for this ride. They serve, I like to think of them as bridges or links between reality and fiction. Okay, so I like to think about what we're doing here as blurring the line. And what line? The line between reality and fiction. Yes, we are writing fiction. right? This is not Argo. This is not Lone Survivor. We are writing fiction. But we want to have reality in it, and we want the reader to know the reality, right? He knows what a Rolex watch is, right? He knows what a vodka martini is. He knows what time zone Washington, D.C. is relative to L.A., right? So that's known. Reader just going to go along with that. Now start blurring it. Start introducing elements that you've made up, and do it in a way that's very subtle, so that the reader doesn't know it. And then the reader is in, right? He's buying the story, and he's going, wow, that's pretty amazing. One of the best examples, and when I first realized how important this is, it's not a thriller novel. It's considered sci-fi, but in my opinion, it's a border sci-fi thriller, is Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park. Now, everyone has probably read that. And the setup, when you read the book, the setup is that scientists have discovered how to clone dinosaurs. And they've done that by recovering DNA from dinosaur fossils. Now, is that true? It is. It is. Not the complete DNA code, but a lot of DNA has been recovered from dinosaur fossils. That's very interesting. It's first hook, it's real. However, the complete genetic code is not there. So how does Crichton get you to living, breathing dinosaurs if the complete genetic code is not there? And he goes, oh, well, it's easy. Dinosaurs are reptiles. Reptiles and amphibians are very closely related. So our scientists are going to steal some sections of the genetic code from amphibians, insert it into that dinosaur DNA. Voila, we have eggs hatching. We've got Tyrannosaurus Rex. All sounds completely plausible. And it even gets better. It even gets better because as the novel goes on, we learn this island is isolated, but things are going to hell in a big hurry because the dinosaurs are multiplying. Well, how can that be? They're only supposed to be making one particular sex of dinosaurs, so that they can't multiply. Well, that amphibian DNA that they put in happens to be the part of the amphibian genetic code that allows sexual mutation. So a male can flop to a female, or a female can flop to a male. Wow, it was amazing. It's absolutely amazing. This is all plausible. And that is such a tremendous hook. You know, I was reading that story going, I'm just overwhelmed. And what a way to get you along on this ride to believing that, yeah, you know, they could have this island down in the Caribbean with dinosaurs all over it, right? So that's what I call blurring the line. You want to have enough reality in there that when you start extrapolating into fiction, the reader doesn't really know it, and you need to do it subtly. All right, so location. And this is going to be our first assignment. It's very, very easy, but it's also subtle. All right, now I've done a lot of travel, and that's both a blessing and a curse. In the last several years of my life, I've been traveling a lot to China. Prior to that, I've been to Europe. I've traveled a lot around the US. And one of my fellow authors who writes mysteries, she was asking me, well, you know, I want to set a novel in, I think it was Minsk. She said, but I've never been there before. So how do I do that? I said, well, Nancy, you've been to London. You've traveled a bit around Europe. You're an American. So you know what it's like to go to a hotel or a restaurant. Right? And there's certain things that are just the same. So whether I'm checking into a hotel in Beijing or in Denver or in Frankfurt, I know what to expect, right? Before I walk up to that desk, I know what's going to happen because I've done it, right? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Think of 3 to 5 things, very, very short, one word, short phrase, that are going to happen when you check into a hotel. Don't worry about where the hotel is, but take a moment, and I'll wait like 30 seconds or so. Write them down, and then let Mike know if you want to respond. And if no one wants to respond, then I'll just go on. But if we have a few people who want to share what they wrote down, then Mike will facilitate you. Okay? So I'm going to transfer control to you, Mike. And if you've got people who want to respond, great. If not, just let me know and I'll move on.
So a couple of people said done. So if anybody wants to, basically at this point, if you want to share, just unmute yourself and say what you wrote or part of what you wrote.
Okay, I'll go. So my 3 things are: I register, I collect my room key, and I get the bellhop to take my bags.
Good. Good.
All right.
Mine's oh, is she done?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, mine's similar. I had fill out the paperwork and sign in, get key card, carry suitcase to the room and check it out, and use the bathroom.
I'm with you.
So Mary gets a bellhop and you have to carry your own, huh?
Well, usually they have a cart.
Okay.
Somebody else.
Anyone else?
Tom, did you want to share?
I wrote, ask if I want 1 key or 2. I'm offered a bellman to accept or decline, and I'm told I have a message.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good.
The bellman wants to take my luggage, but I wish he wouldn't because I don't know when I'm going to get it back. The desk makes me anxious because it takes them a long time to find my reservation. In the meantime, someone brings me a scented towel in belief that I'm going to like that, but I wish they wouldn't.
I like it. I like it. There's a lot of detail in that, and that's ultimately that's where I want you to go. So I appreciate that.
Barbara, did you have your hand up? You're muted if you want to talk.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So here's what I put down, and all of you had good answers, by the way. That's excellent. When you check in, you're always asked to present an ID, and that offers a lot of interesting opportunities here from a writer's perspective. First of all, who's asking you? Who's behind the check-in counter? Is it a lady or a man? What do they look like? How are they reacting to you? In a foreign country, and again, thinking about writing a thriller, that has a lot of interesting hooks. What are you going to use for your ID? Is it going to be your driver's license? Probably, if you're here in the US. If you're overseas, it's going to be a passport. Maybe you're going to use a passport other than your real passport. Showing that ID also gives an opportunity to introduce the name of the character. You know, maybe up to this point, the character has not been named. And so you can name the character by showing that passport. And so those are just things that I put there. Parking permit, did you drive? If so, you're gonna need a parking permit probably for your vehicle. Or did you arrive by taxi or Uber? As all of you pointed out, you're gonna get your key, you're gonna go to your room. Something that I do, I'm gonna look for where the bar is, the restaurant, maybe the gym. Probably not, for me, not so much the gym, but definitely the bar and the restaurant. And then when I open the door to my room, is there anything unusual? I think one of the responses was, look for something unusual. Yeah, definitely. I want to make sure everything is there that's supposed to be there. Again, in the setting of a thriller, there may be reason for this person to be running or to fear that he's being followed or bugged. So they may want to look around the room. I'm always going to set the thermostat. I don't like rooms that are hot. Put my clothes away. So anyway, these are just things that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. These things you're going to do. And so this is a way that you can write and bring reality to a location that you've never been to. I did this for a novel, and the hotel was in Caracas, Venezuela. I visited Caracas, but I haven't stayed in a hotel there. And so the question was, well, how did you know how to write about the hotel? It's because any hotel in the world that you go to, all of these actions are going to be universal. And so then you can go online and look at the hotel. You can see pictures of the lobby, and you can write very compelling, very realistic settings then that revolve around that process of going into the lobby and checking in. Okay, so when we're doing research, see if I can move this here for a moment. The importance of research can't be overstated. And firsthand knowledge is always the best, the highest value research. A couple of years ago, I visited Alcatraz in the San Francisco Bay Area with my family. And we were there for half a day wandering around, and it just struck me as just an ideal setting for a novel. I had no idea what the novel was going to be at the time I was there. But later I used it in a novel that I finished here recently called Judgment at Alcatraz. It'll be released in the spring. And based on what I learned walking around Alcatraz and being inside the buildings and feeling the air and looking at the water and gazing across the bay towards San Francisco and Berkeley and Richmond, that knowledge I couldn't get from an internet search. And so it's golden. It's really what you want to do, if at all possible. But it's not always possible. I also did this for one of my novels where much of the scene, or many of the scenes, were up here in the Cascades on the eastern slope of Broken Top. It's a part of the mountains that I love going to. And I've been up there enough that I could close my eyes and reimagine what this country looks like. And so it was very easy then to incorporate that into the novel. I've also done the same with Oregon State University and University of Oregon. I know those campuses well. And so I was able to bring that reality into novels. But you can't always do that. Or it's just impractical, I should say, to always do that. So the internet is great. You can learn a lot. What can you learn? Well, you get city maps, for example. Recently, I had a scene at a Korean restaurant in London, not far from Piccadilly. Now, I haven't been to this restaurant, but I know it exists. I found it in searching restaurants in London, found the address. It was close to the Ritz Piccadilly, which is what was important to the setting. I got all the street layout from it, the street names. And so you can bring this detail. And some editors, by the way, some editors might push back on that. They say it's too much detail. Not in thrillers. Thrillers thrive on this detail. Take a look at any New York Times or international best-selling thriller, and you're going to find that they put a ton of detail into it, which is contrary to the approach that an editor might offer. I had that argument with my editor 4 or 5 years ago when I first started working with Light Messages, and we don't have that argument anymore. But you need it. You need it. So go to the internet where you have to. If you can use firsthand knowledge when you're researching locations, that's better. But when you can't, go to the internet and look for that detail. All right, street names. What directions do the streets go? Do they have corners, curves? What do the restaurants look like? What's the restaurant name? What landmarks are nearby? What might you be driving past if you're going from the Ritz Piccadilly to this Korean restaurant, right? So that's the type of detail that you want to bring in. That is the reality, and that's going to bridge to the fictional events that my characters are going through. Okay, time zones and time in general. It's critical. It is super, super important because we all know time. No one functions without working with time. Time zones in particular are easy to mess up. I worked on a novel not too long ago where a lot of the action was taking place on either side of the international time zone. And that was really tough, bouncing back and forth between those, because what's today is tomorrow in China and vice versa. When my son was young, I called him from China and I said, yeah, it's tomorrow. He goes, what do you mean it's tomorrow? I said, well, it is, Ryan, it's tomorrow. And for a 6-year-old, that was pretty hard to grasp. But time is super important. So if you have a character here in Bend, Oregon, and a lot of my stories are based here in Bend, they'll be talking to people on the phone, say in Washington, D.C. So if it's a 9 o'clock call here, it's late, it's almost midnight, or it is midnight in Washington. So you can have an evening call from the West Coast and be a late evening call in Washington. So what does that mean? Well, it means if it's a business call, people in Washington are staying at the office very, very late. So you just have to keep all of that straight in your mind. You know, I find a globe is really helpful in looking at both geography but time zones. It's easy to get time zones from search, internet search. But again, it's super, super critical and it's easy to mess up. Another aspect of time is how long it takes for events to happen. So how long, if you're traveling from here to there or from A to B, and you can arbitrarily pick what it is, how long does it take? Well, the answer is by what method? So if you're walking, it's going to be one answer. If you're driving, it's going to be a different answer. If you're flying, it's going to be yet a different answer. If you're flying by commercial or private plane, it's yet a different answer. So how long it takes for events to happen, you've got to stay true to reality, because as soon as you trip up, you know, if you get your time zones messed up, or if you think that you can fly from here to Washington on a commercial flight in 2 hours, the reader's going to say, oh, that's a bunch of BS, and you're likely to lose them. So paying attention to that detail is important. Another aspect is how long does it take for a complex series of events to happen. For example, you may have some sort of criminal action that sets in play a plot in your novel. Well, if that criminal action, let's say it's a burglary, is responded to by the police, and then the police respond to the burglary with a detective who's investigating that, and that detective then has to develop some suspects, that takes time, right? And it's not the 60 minutes that they show on CSI. It might take days for that to happen. Right? You need to write that in a way that's very believable. And so think about that too as an element of time. Time is so important, and it's, like I said, it's a very easy one to get wrong, to make mistakes on. So health and medicine. This for me is a biggie because I see it violated so often. Quite often in thrillers, there's gunplay. And you'll see this both in movies as well as read it. And I can't tell you how many times bullets are stopped by a human body in fiction, but that just isn't true. It's not true at all. You know, the FBI criteria for a suitable round for their service pistol, it used to be revolver, now it's a semi-automatic pistol. The criteria for that round is that it penetrates 13 inches. Now measure the depth from your chest to your back. It's not 13 inches, it's about 6, maybe 8, right? So bullets are not stopped by the human body. So anytime you see in a movie someone holding up or hiding behind the bad guy who's being hit by the bullets and the bullets don't go through, it's complete BS. Now you might do it. You might do it in a novel. And I did this once where I had that body wearing body armor that was designed, so level 2, level 3 body armor designed to stop pistol rounds. So that's plausible, that works. But otherwise, no, forget it. The body does not stop bullets, especially if you're talking rifle bullets. Okay, so I've hunted a lot. I've seen what rifle bullets do to game as large as moose. And I can tell you that a standard rifle bullet will travel through a moose, and a moose is a much bigger critter than a human being. Another thing to keep in mind is that humans are both very fragile and very durable. It can be quite remarkable how a very small, almost insignificant event can tip the scale in the balance between life and death. But major arteries and veins are throughout your body, your arms, your legs, your torso, your neck. So damage, whether it be from a knife, whether it be from a bullet, whether it be from just trauma, damage to those arteries and veins can lead to fatal bleeding in a hurry. I don't remember the name of the movie. It probably came from a book, but it starred Danny Glover, rarely as the bad guy. And he was a serial killer. And the way that he killed his victims was a knife cut across the inner thigh. And that happens to be where the femoral artery is found. And a knife cut or a bullet wound across the femoral artery is going to lead to a bleed out in a matter of 1 to 2 minutes, very, very rapidly. For a normal adult, a female body holds 9 pints of blood and a male 12 pints. Loss of a third of that is considered to be an extremely dangerous event, a life-threatening event. And if you lose half of your blood, 2/3 of your blood, you very likely are dead at that point. So my point here is that any kind of severe trauma to the human body, whether it be to the arm, to the leg, to the torso, to the neck, is very likely to be extremely serious or life-threatening or fatal. So bear in mind when you're writing and injuries are occurring to your protagonist or to an antagonist, whatever the case may be, just try to keep it real. If you're thinking about where bullet placements might be or knife cuts might be to your protagonist and be survivable, be very cautious about how you write that. Gray's Anatomy is a good reference to see how the human body is laid out, where the organs are, where the major arteries and veins are. You can also find similar two-dimensional mappings through an internet search. The information is out there. And I'll talk a little bit about Mark Greaney for a moment and the Gray Man series. Remember, I mentioned that in, I think, the 3rd or 4th slide. Great author. I love his work tremendously. But I read a review recently where a reader said, you know what? The Gray Man keeps getting cut, shot, hammered, run over, and he's always coming back, and it's just not believable anymore. And Mark lost a reader, a very faithful reader at that point. So just be cautious about what you write there. Be true to human body, be true to health. Also remember that wounds take time to heal. And that time may be from days to months, depending on how severe they are. It bugs the crap out of me in a movie where I see the guy getting shot and then 2 days later he's running around like nothing happened. It just isn't real. And then also the effect of illness or fatigue on strength, on reaction time, on stamina, on mental clarity. So, your protagonist may get wounded, but it takes a toll, and factor that into it. And you know what? It's not bad. It gives you a lot of opportunity to have some fun with the writing and to take it in different ways and to add new layers of suspense and intrigue and anxiety. So keeping it real is super important, and I don't think there's any penalty or downside to it. Okay, now I want to talk about things, and I'm going to begin with weapons as things because they are omnipresent in thrillers. And in particular, guns, right? So if you read thrillers, you're going to be reading about guns. And hopefully, if that's a put off, then you probably don't read thrillers. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to write thrillers, you got to deal with it. And so how do we keep it real? So here's my assignment. And this will be harder if you've never fired a gun. But if you have shot a gun before, I don't think this is going to be too hard. But write 3 words or short phrases that describe what you sense when you shoot a gun. Okay? And if possible, list them in the sequence they occur, but that's secondary, all right? So I'll give you 30 seconds, and again, I'll turn it over to Mark So let Mark know if you want to respond. If no one wants to respond, then I'll go on and share with you what or how I answered it.
Minda, do you want to share? You didn't get to go last time.
Sure. That's because my dogs were barking, so I muted. Heavy, cold metal that warms, smooth to the touch.
Okay.
Nice.
You actually came up with one there that I didn't think of. That's good. Anyone else?
Andy? Oh, Andy wrote, focus on the front sight, press, don't think, repeat. Who else? Mary?
Release the safety and aim carefully at the target. Squeeze the trigger, feel the kick that knocks back.
Excellent, excellent.
I'll go. First, there's the anxiety about aiming, remembering to squeeze the trigger, and then wondering where the bullet actually went. Did it hit the target?
That sounds exactly like how I do it.
That's my experience.
I echo that anxiety. I think there's that moment before you squeeze where you get a just this anxious feeling throughout your body until that release, right?
I had a very fun time in a scene in Valiant Savage where the governor of Oregon and the protagonist, Peter Savage, are in a life and death struggle. They're outnumbered, and Peter tells the governor that she has to shoot the shotgun. He's got a shotgun and a rifle, and he's going to use the rifle, and she has to be ready if people come through the door with the shotgun. And she is just a staunch anti-gunner. But Peter asks her, has she ever had any experience with shooting a gun before? And she says, well, I dated a lobbyist for the NRA once, but it didn't work out. And so Peter says, well, what didn't work out, the dating or the shooting? And she replies that neither worked out very well. Any other comments? Okay, so here's what I have. And I really appreciate that several of you went back even further in the chain of events than I did by releasing the safety, making sure you have a good sight picture. But I have pressure of your index finger on the trigger. You know, it's I'm being a little bit picky here perhaps, but if your character is familiar with firearms, they're going to know the difference between jerking or pulling the trigger and squeezing it. So I think Mary said squeezing. It's very good. That's exactly what you want. Sharp push of the stock into my shoulder, and then an extremely loud, deafening report. And here's, again, something that's often either overlooked or just ignored outright in order to facilitate the flow of dialogue. But if there's a gunfight going on, everyone is going to pretty much be deaf. And so no one's going to be talking. They're going to be shouting. And the characters still may not hear each other. You may have to rely on on pushing or hand gestures. There'll be ringing in the ear. The characters will have their ears ringing. So the events that happen concurrent with firing of weapons and then afterwards should influence the dialogue and the way that your characters are behaving. And so again, just keep that in mind. All right, those are all real good responses. I would encourage, by the way, if any of you are writing thrillers or want to write thrillers, and you plan to have firearms in there, if you have not shot a gun, find someone who will take you shooting and go through the experience, because having done that is so much more valuable and influential to your writing than just what you see on television or the movies. That's mostly wrong. Most of the time it's wrong. So try to get the experience if you haven't done it already before you start writing about it. Okay, now here's a couple of television shows where you can learn a lot of what's real and what's not real in the way Hollywood depicts firearms. Mythbusters, the original one, you can still find it in reruns, and Hollywood Weapons. They both often test firearm myths. For example, do bullets penetrate into the water? So if you're being shot at, if your character is being shot at and they're in a lake or the ocean, can they avoid harm by diving 2 or 3 feet under the water? Good question. Can you fire a firearm underwater? If you do, is it going to blow up? Is it going to have the desired effect, meaning the bullet is going to travel and do harm to the person or to the thing that you're aiming at? These are all things that have been tested. And in many cases, I found the results a little bit surprising, but it's good and entertaining. So if you're looking for references, try these two. I would admonish you that guns do need to be reloaded and often. So just keep that in mind when you're writing. It's something, if you go back and look at some of the older Chuck Norris movies, it's gonna never run out of ammo. It's just always shooting, and that's just not the way it is. I already mentioned that a body rarely stops a bullet. If you've watched the movie Quigley Down Under, there's a scene at the end where Matthew Quigley is up in the mountains and he's looking down onto the Marston Ranch, and 2 of Marston's ranch hands are standing one behind the other, and boom, they get hit by a bullet. Now, they both go down, and then a couple of seconds later, you hear the report. And that is absolutely true. Okay, the bullet will arrive from a rifle. The bullet will arrive at the target before the sound will. One person will not stop the bullet. So if you have 2 people lined up, the bullet's going to go through both of them. And in the military, they call that shot a Quigley. This is true. So when military snipers are able to get 2 targets with 1 shot, that's called a Quigley from the movie. So all true. Okay, so other things, vehicles. Vehicles are a rich source of reality and fun in thrillers. Dirk Pitt, star of the late Clive Cussler novels, he was always featured driving some classic automobile. And in fact, in the novels, Dirk Pitt has a collection of classic automobiles that he kept in a warehouse just outside of Reagan National Airport. And then whatever automobile Pitt is driving in that novel is on the back cover. So if you get the hardcover, or probably even true for the paperback version, but that novel or that automobile is shown on the back cover. Now, it turned out that Clive Cussler was a collector of classic automobiles, and he had the money to spend on it. So he has or had quite a fantastic collection. and he would feature one of his automobiles in whatever book he was writing. And so that was, you know, a novelty to that series. And it was fun, you know. It's real, it was fun, and you could see what the car looked like on the back cover. But maybe your protagonist rides a motorcycle. So you could say, you know, Peter hopped on his motorcycle and sped off in pursuit of the vehicle, right? Or you could say he's riding a Ducati. Or you could say he's riding a Yamaha dirt bike, right? So adding that detail is important. It tells you a lot more than just a motorcycle. Maybe he's not into motorcycles or classic automobiles, but he owns a Gulfstream 5. So a lot that you can do with vehicles. And I would argue that readers really like this. Don't go generic. It's not a sedan. It's a Kia, or it's a Chevy Volt, or it's a Maserati. And you can also use that to say something about your character. Is your character wealthy? If so, maybe he drives a Bentley. I happen to know a gentleman he lives in Hong Kong, he's extremely wealthy, and he has 2 Bentleys. And I asked him, I said, William, why do you have 2 Bentleys? Why not a Bentley and a Rolls Royce? And his reply was, well, the Rolls Royce makes me look too old. So he drives Bentleys, okay? So that's interesting. Maybe your character drives a Hummer or a Ford pickup, okay? So there's a lot more than just the vehicle. The vehicle says something about the character. Beverages. This is one that I like to put into novels, and a lot of other authors have done this to great effect. Alcohol, coffee. Is your character a coffee drinker, a tea drinker? Do you like soda? Everyone knows James Bond likes his vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. What about whiskey? You know, if you're going to set a scene here in Bend, are people going to drink a beer? Well, it's not a beer. It's going to be a local microbrew, okay? What about food? Is your character a food junkie? I'm sorry, a junk food junkie. Are they into health food? Do they have a specific diet that they follow? Again, going back to James Bond, he's known to like toast, orange juice, and black coffee for breakfast. That's him. That says something about him. He always does that. So this is a man who follows routine, okay? All right, so now the third and last assignment, things, personal items. So I want you to think about a significant character. It could be a good guy, it could be a villain. And what does that character wear, right? 3 items, could be 2. But what does that character wear that says something about that character? I don't care what it is, but just it tells me something about that character, just knowing that he or she wears it.
As Barbara has just done, if anybody wants to put their items in the chat, I'm happy to read them out loud.
Anyone?
Does anyone want to just read theirs? All right, here we go. We got a leather duster. I personally put down sunscreen. Minda also added a Stetson hat. Tom says Skeet wears Hawaiian shirts, Mephisto sandals, and Maui Jim shades.
Love it. Love it. Especially the shades. I like that. I also have Maui Jim shades. Men's Warehouse suit, Florsheim shoes, hemp ankle bracelet. There's an interesting character. I like that. I like that. Okay, so here's what I had. A watch, okay, an expensive watch. If one of my characters is wealthy, they're very likely going to wear an expensive watch. They may also have a heavy gold chain around their neck. I have a Ben detective, Ruth Colson, in my novels, and she always wears U of O green sneakers and a duck sweatshirt, and she carries around a pad of paper and a pen. And I think that speaks volumes about her. And then another one that I've done is blue jeans and buffalo leather loafers. So a lot of good responses there. And you know, this is intended to tell you something, to tell the reader about your character. And what's fun with this is that different readers are going to take away different things. So it gives the readers an opportunity to be creative on their own in interpreting who your characters are. All right, I think I'm approaching the end here. So in thrillers, yeah, this is the last page, in fact. In thrillers, keep it real. Use links or bridges between reality and fiction. Location, time, health, things. These are great places to put in these links or these bridges. There are also potentially traps where you can make mistakes, and you don't want to appear to your reader as a fraud. So keep it real, do the research, use these links to draw your readers into the story, so that they'll never know when you've departed from reality into imagination. And I've given my my contact information here again. And if anyone wants to talk, email, have a phone conversation, drink, or meet for a cup of coffee, whatever, just let me know. Happy to do it. If anyone wants to carry on this conversation, again, the first 3 respondents by email, I'll send you a copy of my my forthcoming book. All right, so thanks so much for the participation. A lot of great responses there, and I hope you found this helpful.
Thank you, Dave. Much appreciated. And I'm going to stop your share.
Yep.
Good, okay, all right. So we're back to semi-normal. So we can just open this up at this point. If you want to ask Dave a question, if there was anything that came up during the course of this. I wanted to mention that Andy put in a nice little narrative on the checking into the hotel in the chat. The American Colony Hotel in East Jerusalem was the de facto headquarters of the Palestine Liberation Authority. The Israeli taxi driver dropped me near Herod's Gate and Salhadin Street. He would not go any farther. I dropped my bag in the lobby and waited at the desk. Security surrounded me, grabbed my bag and threw it outside. Never leave a bag unattended. Welcome to Israel. And Trish, you mentioned that you did kind of the same thing. Do you want to share the one that you did? You're muted.
I kept having some weird thing that's coming up in front of my mute. I don't know, I've got to clean off my computer again. I thought maybe I misunderstood the assignment because I wrote sweaty and tense. I stroll into the lobby from Central Avenue, feigning confidence. I kind of look like her, dark hair, glasses, tall. We both weigh about the same. Well, I could be a little heavier. Passing the elegant bar with glossy wood tables accented in silver chrome, I sense more than see that I'm being watched. At the counter that meets my chest, walnut covered in thick resin, I set down my friend's driver's license and remind myself to breathe. The polite, bored hotel clerk glances at me and the license and hands me a key card, gives me directions for how to connect to the internet, and tells me to enjoy my stay. I'm dizzy from holding my breath when I walk into the elevator and punch the number 12.
Nice. You got a lot done in 30 seconds there, Trish.
So, yeah, anyway.
Looks like Irene has a question for you. You want to just ask, Irene?
Sure. Dave, when, the internet is great and on-the-ground research is better, but when it comes down to it, how does the balance really reflect, or does it change novel to novel for you as far as novel by Google and on-the-ground research versus the ideal balance of those two?
Oh yeah, it does change from novel to novel. I've written some novels where I've had no on-the-ground research, and I have to backfill using what I know to be common actions. For instance, as I mentioned before, checking into a hotel, it really doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's a similar process, and so you can write that whether you've been there or not. So, there have been novels where all of the action has taken place in another location. And a good example is Minsk. My third novel takes place at the Belarusian State University in Minsk. Now, I've never been there. I've never been to Belarus. But at the time I wrote that, the geopolitics were quite interesting. They're even more interesting now. Russia, at the time I wrote that novel, had not annexed the Crimea, but everything took place in a university. Now, I've spent a lot of time in universities. I've visited a lot of universities. So by looking at photos of the Belarusian State University, I had a pretty good idea of what it looked like. I could anticipate what an academic's office would look like. I've been in them. I could anticipate what a laboratory might look like. I've been in them. I could anticipate what it was like to check into a hotel in Minsk because I've done it in many hotels around the world. So I was able to put all of that together based on street layouts, based on photos, and my knowledge of similar places. And sometimes you just have to do that.
Hey, Dave, can I ask you too, what is it to write a thriller as an American? Has that changed, do you think, in the last 10 years? Like coming from being an American author, an American perspective when you use international settings? For you, I guess, has it changed?
No, it hasn't changed for me at all, but I've only been writing thrillers for 7 or 8 years. So, so I don't have a reference point to what it might have been like 10 or 20 years ago. But no, I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's changed at all.
Other questions? I think you were pretty comprehensive.
I'd like to ask
Go
a
ahead,
question,
Ted.
if I may.
Yep.
You find sometimes that you're getting too close to reality. I mean, if I write a story and the hero is the sheriff's detective for Deschutes County, well, there really is somebody out there who is the sheriff's detective for Deschutes County. I don't know him. I don't know what he's like, but and I don't know what kind of car he drives, but I'm nervous about getting too close.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I haven't had a similar anxiety, but I haven't written about a similar character. I have written about Ben detectives. I think it's rather generic, although I try to put unique characteristics in my character. But I've done the same for Ben attorneys. I haven't picked a an elected official in Bend or Deschutes County. I did do the Oregon governor, and I modeled, I did not name my character Kate Brown, but her initials are KB.
That's pretty close.
It is. I mean, everyone's going to know who it is.
Yeah.
And I tried to keep the character close to what I perceive Kate Brown to be based on what I read about her in the media. I was careful not to be disparaging about her. I don't know Kate Brown, so I mean, she might be a perfectly great person, even whether I agree or disagree with her politics is really irrelevant. I wanted the character to be the Oregon governor. I wanted that character in my story. And so I found it fun, and I think it was an opportunity to bring reality into that story by making the character as close to Kate Brown as I could without naming the character Kate Brown. In a couple of my novels, I have the president of Russia, and his name is Pushkin, not Putin.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's the same character, and everyone who reads it will know that.
Yeah.
But I've stayed away from local elected officials, so I don't really know how to answer your question on that.
Well, it was a good answer.
Where do you come up with ideas?
Just all over. Sometimes from the scientific literature, sometimes from reading about what's happening in the military. Sometimes it's just pure geopolitical shenanigans. In one case, I was inspired by the Japanese atrocities on Chinese in Nanking at the outset of World War II. It's just all over. There are so many places to get inspiration, so many. And when I start a novel, I usually don't know exactly where it's going to go. I just know how to begin it, and then once I get going, it goes where it goes. Yeah, I have the start of 2 or 3 novels in my head at any given time.
Other questions for Dave?
Do you ever use, like, when I haven't been writing fiction for a while, but when I was writing fiction, I often would contact people who had done things I hadn't done. Do you ever talk to other people and interview other people to see, to get their perspective on certain things when you don't have an expertise in a certain area or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate that I have a friend who's a medical doctor, and so he's been able to advise me on many aspects related to physiology. And I have another friend from high school who ended up in energetic materials.
Oh, energetic materials.
And he gave me advice on how dynamite behaves, right? If you have 2 cases of dynamite sitting a couple of feet apart and you detonate one case, will the other case go off? And the answer is probably, but not certainly. I have a nephew who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He served 20 years and is now teaching in California. Yeah. And I had a question about grenades. I said, well, if I have a satchel full of grenades and someone drops a grenade into it and it explodes, will all of the grenades explode? And the answer is maybe. And another friend who was the district attorney in Lane County for a while, now he runs the state police crime lab. So I've talked to Alex a lot about legal questions. One of the most interesting issues actually was just recently with Alex. And there's this unique geographical area in the United States that has been dubbed the zone of death. Now, anything called the zone of death has got to be in a thriller novel. And in fact, C.J. Box wrote a novel, I think 10 years ago, called Free Fire. And the zone of death figures in that novel. Now, the zone of death is it's a thin strip, it's about a 50-mile strip of land in Idaho that is also in the Yellowstone National Park. And what's interesting here is that Yellowstone was our first national park, and it was created before Idaho or Montana came into the Union. So Idaho and Montana were not states at the time. And consequently, all of Yellowstone National Park falls under the jurisdiction of the state of Wyoming, the federal jurisdiction of the Wyoming Circuit Court. But part of Yellowstone is in Montana and part of Yellowstone is in Idaho. Now, the importance here is that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights require that an accused be given a jury trial composed of jurors from the location. And in this case, that would be both Yellowstone Park and Idaho if the crime was committed in that section of Idaho that's in Yellowstone Park. Well, no one lives there, so you can't convene a jury. And this legal conundrum was written up a few years ago and published, and even brought to the attention of Congress, and Congress has refused to act on it. And so it still exists. So look for it in my next novel. It's going to be there, as it just has to be. But yeah, I do like to reach out. And Alex, my friend who used to be the DA in Lane County, says, yep, there is absolutely nothing crazy about the legal theory that you could literally get away with murder there.
Irene has a question that based on the series, and she says, how do you know when it ends? And I see on your website that you've got that your novels are written as standalone, but
yeah.
Peter Savage is a person who is born at one end of his life and is going to die at the other. And so how does the chronology of that work with you? And do you have an ending, or is there an ending, or is that even a consideration?
As of this point in time, he's still alive and kicking. It has not ended yet. There will be a time when I don't write about him anymore. But you know, I mean, this has been the case with James Bond, right? I mean, James Bond was first written in the 1950s, and we're still seeing original James Bond stories come out in the form of film. So your
what about the Reacher stories?
Well, yeah, Jack.
He even tried to kill Reacher, and the fans threw such a tizzy that he brought him back under ridiculous circumstances.
Yeah, well, yeah, I won't do.
The guy still sells a bazillion books.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, you never have to kill off. That doesn't have to be logical, Mike. Part of the fun of fiction is that you use reality to make people think they're in reality, but we never want to kill off their characters unless we just can't stand the idea of writing another book. In fact, even sometimes when, like there's a new guy that took over writing the Spencer books after Robert Parker passed away. So there are still Spencer books because people love Spencer. He never has to die, Dave. As long as you have people buying books.
That's true. So your characters can become ageless, right? At least for your protagonists. But you know, one challenge that I have to deal with here is that I've had the same U.S. president now since I started writing these novels, President Taylor. And I'm facing the point where I need to make a decision. Is he done? Has he finished 2 terms or not? So it is something to think about. You know, main characters, main protagonists can live on and they almost become ageless. But what about the supporting characters? Are you going to do the same with them, or are you going to move on? And if you do that, right, the time will come when President Taylor is no longer in office because he's completed his 2 terms. And I think that that's good because it shows that I am paying attention to time. I am showing that, you know, this is not just a section of time that we're locked into, or it's not Groundhog Day. That the characters are evolving and moving on, but just not the main character.
And then let's do one last question. Mary asked how the pandemic has affected your writing process.
Oh, I have a good story around that one. So it was good for me actually. In mid-March, I took a trip to China, hoping that I was going to get there just before they closed the border. I was flying into Hong Kong and then taking a car from Hong Kong across the border into Shenzhen and then on to Guangzhou. And as it turned out, I missed the window and I got thrown into 2 weeks of quarantine, which is a very nice way of saying house arrest. So for 2 weeks, I was locked into a hotel room that was, basically, well, it's a hotel room, right? It's a bed, it's a small desk, and it's a bathroom. And I couldn't even go into the hallway. Food was delivered to my door, and there I was for 2 weeks. And so I got 20,000 words written. It was great. And so that was wonderful. But it isn't all good. I can't travel, and that's unfortunate. But otherwise, it's not affecting me. I've got a release coming out in October. My publisher picked up a new series that we're going to release in April, and so I'm busier than ever.
Good.
And I don't have those 2 weeks locked in a room to write.
All right. Any last questions from anyone? Thank you all so much for coming. And Dave, thanks a lot. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you, Dave, very much.
And I think it's beneficial to all. I mean, it's not just thriller writing. A lot of that detail work that you talked about there, I think that's very important to creating a reality. And I believe that even in fiction, if you're on some planet far away, there has to be some sense of a reality that the reader can buy into, right? And those details that you shared with us were really helpful. I'm going to put in the chat if anyone's interested in reading at our December meeting, email us. And also we are going to do board elections in January. So if anyone is interested in being on the board of directors, get in touch with us and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So thank you all very much for coming. Thanks for supporting Central Oregon Writers Guild. Dave, thanks again. And Morri had to go to another thing, and thanks for reading Morri. And thanks Mary for getting that together. And thanks Trish for just being you, and Nicole, thanks for coming too. All right, that's it. We'll put this, there will be a recording of this on the website probably within a few days. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you, Mike, for doing all the stuff you do. You need acknowledgement too. Honestly, I know you always you're quiet, but it's a big deal. What you do is a big deal, and we appreciate it.
Thanks,
so thank
Trish.
you.
You've been a big help, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
It was good to see you, Dave. And I'm glad you're still writing it, that, because we hadn't seen you for a while. You were traveling and then the pandemic. So it's really good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.